What's up, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am reviewing a graphic novel, specifically Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 4. This is once again a tie-in to the Avengers vs. X-Men big miniseries thing, event, I guess you could call it. And like I said in my review of Volume 3 last week, I have not read Avengers vs. X-Men. I don't really plan to. But I'm going to go ahead and say that this volume is actually quite a bit more enjoyable for me than Volume 3 was. And I think the reason is, in Volume 3, that whole volume was tying in with Avengers vs. X-Men, and this one sort of is, but it almost feels like Jason Aaron was getting to a point where he was saying, okay, I've said all that I want to say about this Avengers vs. X-Men miniseries. Now I want to get back to doing what I was doing in this series before that event started. And so it almost feels like he is still technically obligated to tie into this big event that was going on at Marvel, but he doesn't really want to, and so he's just kind of going through the numbers, but really he's kind of doing his own thing over here in Wolverine and the X-Men. That's really what it feels like here, and I think that might be why I like this volume quite a bit more than Volume 3, because like I said, I'm not interested in Avengers vs. X-Men. So if you've got a volume that still technically ties in with the event, but it's really more about what this series is about, I'm going to enjoy that a lot more. This story, it still has some good character moments in it. Maybe not as many really solid punching character moments that Volume 3 have, but it's got some good moments. The first issue here, and I should mention, I don't know if I mentioned this, this collects Wolverine and the X-Men 14 through 18. And the first issue here has a date between Kitty Pryde and Colossus, which is kind of a big deal because they had broken up right before the schism happened, and then Colossus is actually one of the 5 mutants who is possessed by the Phoenix Force, and Kitty is over here teaching at the school, so that's kind of a tense moment, and that's a pretty neat issue. We have an issue that focuses on Dupe. I really like that issue. A lot of people I know really hate Dupe, or they don't understand Dupe, I guess. There's really not a whole lot to understand about him. He's just a fun, goofy little character. You don't have to take him too seriously, and this issue shows what he's doing at the school. By this point, this series had been going on for about a year, and I'm sure there were people out there who are reading this saying, what's Duke doing in this series? Why is he here? Well, there's an issue here that kind of shows what he's doing here, and I thought that was a really fun issue. And then you've got an issue that kind of focuses on Cade Kilgore a little bit, or I don't know if it's Kilgore or Kildor, the kid who is the Black King of the Hellfire Club. He's kind of been the main antagonist of this series, and I really like that issue because, as I said in one of my previous reviews of this series, if you skipped Avengers Schism, if you skipped X-Men Schism and you just jumped right into Wolverine and the X-Men, you really wouldn't know a whole lot about these kids who have formed the new Hellfire Club. They really don't have, you don't find out a lot about them in this series. Well then, if you go back and read X-Men Schism, you get a little bit more of Cade's backstory. And then this issue, it's basically just an entire issue that is devoted to showing a lot more about what makes Cade Cade, and I really like that issue. And it's an issue that it completely focuses on the bad guy, but it doesn't make him less of a bad guy. By the end of that issue, he is still the bad guy of this series, and I really like that Jason Aaron was able to do that. He's able to make us care a little bit about this guy, but he is still the villain of this series. And incidentally, that's one of the issues that kind of sort of ties in with Avengers vs. X-Men, but it's not really a major part of that event. It's more about what's going on in Wolverine and the X-Men and less about what's going on in that miniseries. To be honest, I don't have a whole lot else to say here. I just really like that this was able to tie in with the Avengers vs. X-Men miniseries without making me feel like I have to go and read Avengers vs. X-Men, which is something I don't want to do, and also without making the Avengers vs. X-Men stuff so much at the forefront. At this point, it feels like Jason Aaron is comfortable with the amount of stuff that he did concerning Avengers vs. X-Men, so now he can still have that stuff going on in the background, but he can get back to what's going on with the school and with the characters at the school, and I really like that he did that. I do want to talk about the art a little bit. I've been talking about with this series how so far it's just been the tag team of Nick Bradshaw and Chris Bachalo, and I've mentioned a few times that I really like those two together, and I really like the way that they've been alternating here. Now we finally get some different artists in this series. We have Jorge Molina and we have Mike Allred and Chris Bocolo. They're all working on this. Chris Bocolo, of course, had been working on a series from the beginning. Well, Mike Allred, you may know him from the early 2000s X-Force, which later became X-Statix. He was the main penciler. I think he was actually one of the only pencilers on that series, and he's also done some other stuff that I can't right off the top of my head remember, but I've always been a huge fan. Madman. He's the co-creator of the indie series Madman, and I've always been a huge fan of his art, and he does the Dupe issue, which is fitting because Dupe originated in that X-Force run that Mike Allred was the artist for. And then Jorge Molina is actually the main artist here. We do have one issue, at least one issue by Bocolo, maybe two, but I think it's only one. It's the issue that's set in the prison that focuses on the Hellfire kids, specifically Cade. I think Chris Bocolo draws that one, and then the rest of these issues are done by Jorge Molina. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I don't like Molina's artwork as much as I do Bradshaw or Bocolo's, but he is pretty good in this series. I just think that it's a little bit of a step down, but that's not really fair to Molina because Bradshaw and Bocolo, they're like way up here, and then Molina is just like that much below them. Like, it's not really a big departure from what we had. It's a little bit of a departure, but not a huge departure. And there are a few times where a character is making a certain face, and I'm like, oh, what's going on there? But for the most part, this art is really exceptional. If you like Olivier Copiel, who did House of M, if you like that kind of art, then you're probably going to like Molina's artwork here. But for me, I was much more excited about the books that were just Bocolo and Bradshaw. And so having Molina jump on board, it's not a deep step down, it's just a little bit of a step down. I still think it's pretty solid artwork, and if it had been Molina from issue 1, I wouldn't have had any complaints at all. But just going from Bradshaw and Bocolo to now Molina for most of this book was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but not a huge disappointment. That's all I have to say. I really don't have that much to say about this book. I enjoyed this a lot more than I did Volume 3, and now that Avengers vs. X-Men is over concerning this series, I'm hoping that this series can jump right back into what was making it work in the first couple of volumes, and I'm hoping that I will enjoy it just like I was before the Avengers vs. X-Men stuff started. So I'm really looking forward to getting to the rest of this series starting next week. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with an entirely different kind of review. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.